Do not God video presentation. Economics. One more shot. Hadn't mentioned fractional reserve banking, and that's part of the story in the sense that the banks change from them actually having to have money to be able to lend money. Like you had to be rich to do it. In a sense, all you had to do was be a bank, and you really didn't have to have assets to cover the amount of money you lent. So it really doesn't have anything to do with collateral, but it's the related subject, and they're all related. But anyway, so the mystic just makes arguments that just don't have any foundation. Anybody won't accept anybody arguing his arguments not having any foundation. So in here he's going to say that none of you have demonstrated that the money in the Federal Reserve accounts, okay, that is this chart, where it went from below $1 billion for decades. I mean, they could go all the way back at this line. It was a dead straight line. And in 2008, they started this new racket of piling money, debt, in the reserve accounts, which bought our own bonds off the market. But they didn't pay for it. They just had banks exchange checks, pretend they bought something when they didn't really buy it. They're just holding it somewhere because somebody owns it, and they've essentially decided it's sufficient collateral. And in future, we're liable to pay for it. We just don't have to pay for it yet, kind of a thing. So it's money owed the banks, and so now it's almost 6 trillion. So the little line on the very end is going up because they're going to pile in another $1.5 trillion of this fake way of borrowing. So instead of honestly borrowing, where you make a little IOU piece of paper, a bond, and you put it on a market and you say, how much interest do I have to pay for you to lend me the money? So I want $1 billion. How much interest? You make a deal. This way they can just buy those papers off the market, so that when they put a new paper on, it doesn't have to compete with a bunch of other papers offering better rates. And so this is just a way of hiding your debt by making more debt in a place that doesn't show up in the same ledger as the other debt. But it's the same kind of debt. It's no different. It's just borrowed money. And this time you're borrowing it from the banks, which is just kind of ironic. But anyway, so he says this isn't go into the stock market. Now, clearly all the markets are related. So whether you have stocks or commodities or oil or gold or the stock market, they're all commodities, and they're all things that rich people buy. And he keeps talking as if they're things common people own. This is for the regular people. They own all that stuff. When there's just no fact he could base that on. Every statistic I've seen is that 70% of the money is not regular people money, and the only regular people money in the markets, generally speaking, is in the form of their pension funds being in the markets. But they don't have any actual investment capital. Their portfolios are tiny by comparison to the portfolios of the rich. The 1% own more of the stock market, like 85, 89% of it. And the rest is just a tiny percentage of ownership. So the statistics, the facts are directly in contradiction to what he says, and he continues to say it, which is really annoying. All right, so I think I'll just go through it one more time and include in the story the fractional reserve thing. So the idea is that you could go back 1,000 years, or you go back whenever, and the idea would be somebody would be rich and they would acquire stuff like horses or plows or whatever, and they could sell that stuff, and make money. Like they could buy low and sell high. And so that idea of buying low and selling high, I go to India and I pick up some stuff, I bring it back home and sell it for 15 times what I paid for it. So that's just the idea of buying something low, selling high, and making more money to buy more stuff low and sell it more stuff high and make more and more money. And you can either sell the stuff you acquire, your surplus. So you can have a surplus of stuff. I could own a second house. I could sell the second house, or I could rent the second house. And so I can have a constant income from my second house that makes me even richer, and it gives me more money. And then with that more money, I can buy a third house, and on and on. And that's how people made money. So along came the bank as a way of organizing that process. And the idea of the bank is that a rich person would say, well, look, I got gold. I got a standard thing I can give you, a commodity that's easy to carry. And you can come ask me for the commodity, so you can go out into the world and buy stuff, so you can borrow the money from me. Okay, so you give me rights to something you own, like your house, as a guarantee, or you sell your wife into prostitution, or you sell your son into slavery, or whatever. You promise something to guarantee the loan, and then I'll give you the money. You'll pay me a fee, for my trouble and my risk, even though I'm not risking much if I've taken your house, and I'll give you money, okay, gold. And so I can give away so much, because I only have so much gold, though. So I can only give away so much gold, right? So that's all that I can give away, and once I'm out of gold, I can't give you any more gold. So the idea is that we came up with paper, okay, that was a piece of paper that represented gold. So now it gets a little trickier, because, the pieces of paper don't take much to make. And so, you can just print them, And so it was sort of, the idea was still that you were supposed to have as much gold as you made gold paper. So you have a piece of paper that says, I owe you gold, and you're only supposed to make so much value to what real gold you have, because your IOU is supposed to be good. So the king's paper was worth something because the king had the gold. So if you got the idea of currency came about. But now what banks do is they actually have the currency. So the gold, the king's paper, could be in their vault. And they're giving you a piece of paper, a check, that's basically saying, I'm good for it. Now, they don't necessarily have to be good for it, right? They could have used up all their king's paper, and they're giving you IOUs for king's paper. But as long as everybody takes it, it's okay. And especially if the banks sort of have an agreement, that the amount of king's paper, so the other service the bank can provide is it can put your stuff in a vault, right, and keep it safe for you in its vault. And so you can deposit stuff in there, okay, and the bank will pay you to do that, a little fee. Now, that's the way it used to work before 2008. People used to have bank accounts because it was a safe place to put the money, and you got your interest would catch you up with inflation, so your money stayed valuable. Your money didn't die. A slow death. So anyway, but that's dead nowadays. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. So the idea would be is that the bank would find different ways to get king's paper into its vaults, so it could write more paper, promising the king's paper, more bank checks. But the idea would be is that Bank A and Bank B sort of made deals with each other and said, well, look, maybe both of us don't have any more king's paper. We're all out of king's paper. But if somebody deposits, if I give you the piece of IOU paper and you cash that, I'll also be getting stuff in from people that it's your IOU paper. So you made a piece of IOU paper, I'll make a piece of IOU paper, and we'll just understand that, we'll just do this thing. We'll just cross them out, right? If I get $1 million check that you wrote when you gave somebody money, and then I have $1 million check that I wrote promising some money, well, if I cash yours and you cash mine, we'll just call that even and just say, well, nothing really happened, okay, because we're even. So even though neither one of us had the cash, we never had to make the cash exchange, so no one knows the difference. So it doesn't make any difference, because it would just be moving the cash from your vault to my vault to your vault to my vault, and who cares? So that's basically how the banking system worked. And but the catch was if no one monitored that, if no one controlled that, they could really take that to gross excess and end up never having any money in their vault and playing this exchange check game, and one of them could end up going bankrupt, and then the whole game would be over because one is owed real money by the other and he doesn't have the money. And so banks became regulated because there was shenanigans they could do, and so there became a Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, its whole intent, the whole reason why this place existed, the whole reason this accounts existed was to provide that regulation, a place where you could monitor the shenanigans of the banks and their solvency would become obvious. So the idea was is their vaults, they wouldn't have their own vaults anymore in their banks, so to speak, nothing serious anyway, just little cash, petty cash. And their real cash would be in the Federal Reserve, in the Federal Reserve accounts, and that's where the checks would go. So the checks they wouldn't trust the banks to do the switching. The Federal Reserve would do all the switching. So all the checks go to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve would decide how much A owes B, and it would be able to monitor how much real assets they had in their Federal Reserve accounts, real gold, and whether there was real things that could be exchanged, and if one went bankrupt and all that kind of stuff, it'd be quite obvious and visible. And so the whole thing became more, they could scrutinize what they were doing. Now the trick was there was a point where they understood that, in a sense, you don't really need to have, you're confining how easily loans can be made by saying they all must have the cash. So if you make this insistence that you have to have an equal amount of real gold for every piece of paper you're exchanging, well, then then there's going to be a lot of people who can't get a loan because you can't make any more loans because you're out of real cash. And so they came up with this idea of fractional reserve banking, which basically just said it's okay, that you don't have the real cash. You can still lend, okay, as long as it's a guarantee, as long as it's collateralized. The idea would be this is a safe practice. So you just take in a promise of some kind of cash, something that promises value, a claim on value. So what you're really just looking for is a claim on value. Well, I don't need to write it right. You understand English. So you're just looking for something that has that's a real claim on value, and not one doesn't work as a claim on value. You want a piece of paper that has a real claim, real chance of collecting value, and value can be either in the form of gold or any commodity that is regulated and controlled, and there's only so much of it. So there's only so much cash. So let's understand, cash is a protected commodity, just like any other. There's only so much of it, just like gold. There's only so much of it. You're digging it out of the ground. Yes, we make a little bit more cash, but there's less than $2 trillion again in circulation in U.S. cash, small amount of money. There's almost $6 trillion in those reserve accounts. All right. So fractional reserve just meant that you didn't need to have the money in your account. You could just have a percentage of it. So they would figure, so maybe if they start off at 50%, then they lowered it to 25%, and they get away with it, so it's okay. Well, anyway, now they've lowered it to 2%, right? So when the crisis hit, it might have been 5%. So you need to have 5% of cash assets in your accounts to be able to justify the number of loans you're making. So at least 5% of the loan value has to be in cash. Doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of collateral. Just means that at least 5% of it has to be cash. All right. And obviously the collateral is kind of a winner's game, right? I mean, if I take somebody's IBM stock and I'm promised it, right? Well, 70 out of the last 70 years, I was guaranteed that this stock would go up over time. I couldn't lose owning it, let's say. I might have some bad years, but overall, I would have made money, and I would have made a lot of money. Some things are a little bit tricky, like GM stock or something, but I'm just saying, if I just owned the Dow, if I just I just told the broker to buy me one share of everything, the market itself would have gone up, so that collection would have been a winner, and it would have, those 200 stocks would have, owning $1 worth of each one of those stocks over time would have gotten me like 10% a year. All right, so I might have had some bad years and some good years, but it would even out to 10% a year. So owning the Dow Jones and putting it in a vault, huge win. I mean, giant win. Can't lose. You just can't fail to get richer and richer. You're getting 10% increase a year. So anyway, so that would be the thing to have in your vault. The more of that you have in your vault, the better off you're going to feel as a person. You're really winning. All right, so let's see. What do I say? So yeah, so banks are more solvent than the the 2% number. Doesn't mean the bank is insolvent because it could have lots of that good stock. Now it obviously depends on when they bought the stock and whether it's at the buy low, sell high. Well, sometimes they buy high and then they end up having to sell low, so they can screw it up and lose money. Or the stock market can go way up and then it can go down. And when it goes down, then all their collateral starts turning into crap. Okay, so I think it was that stupid Cato the dumbass made some comment about he doesn't think rich people are mortgaged, and of course they are. They don't buy anything with cash. Rich people know you don't buy things with cash. They know how to play the game. They know the real game is to have everything. To keep everything as an IOU, a piece of debt, because debt is money. Because you can put the IOUs in the bank, like the stock, IOU stock, IOU something, and you can gain cash to go buy more stuff with it and get more stuff that's not real cash, more things that are supposed to be valuable that usually are valuable, like a house. You buy a house and you have, over the last 70 years, you had a real good chance that you made money on the house, a lot of money. Just a fact. So some commodities go up and they're very good as collateral, generally speaking, until they're not. And that's the real issue here, is when the not part shows up and all of the stuff that people have been saving all of a sudden isn't worth anything, and all that collateral evaporates, and then the people who have to pay back the loan have no incentive to pay it back because what they're going to buy back out of the pawn shop isn't worth anything. So it's like you go to the pawn shop with a golden goose. I don't know, doesn't matter. Some kind of thing, a painting, right? A Van Gogh. So you go to the pawn shop, you pawn your Van Gogh, you commoditize it, you turn it into a monetary amount of money, and all of a sudden somebody discovers 7,000 Van Goghs in a shed somewhere, and so all of a sudden your Van Gogh went from being worth $50,000 to being worth $5,000. Well, why would you pay the bank back $50,000 to get your Van Gogh back, right? You wouldn't go back to the pawn shop and pay $50,000 to get a $5,000 painting. You'd say, hell with it, I'll just buy a Van Gogh on the open market if I want one, right? Mine's not worth anything anymore. I lost on it, so it's no point in me paying the original fee back. So that's the catch here, is this: once this thing all falls apart, then all these things that the bank has as collateral, nobody wants to buy them back because they're not worth what they owe. So they owe more, like they got $1 million, and the stuff they had in the bank, their IBM stock, is now only worth $50,000. Well, they're not going to pay back $1 million loan to get back $50,000 worth of crap. So this loan is going to be bad, and the bank is going to lose a big giant hunk of money. All right, so that's what the unraveling process looks like. So the game is the reserve account money, even though it says in that chart, right? Put it up again one last time. It says on this chart that the banks have $5.5 trillion worth of cash. Any idiot knows the banks wouldn't want to own $5 trillion worth of cash. If they had $5 trillion worth of cash sitting there in their accounts, they would say, that's not making me any money, that's losing me money. Cash is dead. Cash loses at least maybe 2% a year. Right? It becomes 2% less valuable every year. Why would the banks leave a big pile of cash in the vault when they know it's losing 2% of its value a year? And they know the stock market's going up a guaranteed 10% a year over time. Why the hell would they lose 2% when they can win 10%? right? There's no chance in hell, if that was really their money, the bank's money, that they wouldn't have spent it. There's no way they would leave it in cash. They'd say, no, 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 buy me stuff, get me stuff. So obviously it's not the bank's money. It's obviously just frozen debt. It's just fake cash the government has printed and hasn't released. So what they did, and this is the part that goes to the stock market, what they did with this pile of debt, how they made it, was they told the bank, use one of your fake checks, one of your IOU checks, buy a bond from somebody, okay? Obviously they're going to have to put it in another bank or buy something with it. So the guy who they're buying it from, so they give him one of these checks that says, here's $1 million. The guy who gets the $1 million now has $1 million in his account. The bank gives him an account that says, you have $1 million in your account because I bought this bond from you. I gave you one of my bullshit checks, and you gave me, and you invested it in a bank, whether it's Bank A or Bank B, it doesn't matter. It went into one of those accounts, and that account now allows you to buy stuff because you have value. You have claim on value. I gave you the paper, and now you can buy stuff. And so, of course, they're going to buy something. Again, they're not going to leave their money in cash. They're going to buy some kind of instrument that makes money. So they're going to go back on the market and buy something else. So the guy who sold the bond is going to take the money he gets, and he's going to buy another bond. And he's going to buy that bond in a market that has less bonds in it, right? So if there's 10, if there's, well, it's just 3. There's 4 bonds on the market. Obviously, if I, if I buy one off the market, okay, I bought it. Now there's only 3 on the market, right? I mean, you can get that. And the 3 are going to be worth more than they would have been if there was a 4th one. The same money is going to be chasing it. The same number of buyers exist. It's supply and demand, right? Demand is going to be increasing because you're decreasing supply. So that's a simple argument. So obviously, when I buy any commodity off the market, I'm going to inflate its value, its price, and I'm also freeing money, okay, to buy more instruments. So I'm creating more demand, more money free to buy, and I'm creating less things to buy, right? So you can't possibly not be inflating the market. So the market rises on debt. And again, this is what they figured out after the 1980s, when everyone was panicking about the debt Reagan was creating. All of a sudden the rich people noticed, hey, you know what? The stock market goes up. The more we write government paper, the more government IOUs we write, the more the stock market goes up. So obviously debt goes right into the stock market because debt gets invested as it gets monetized. I mean, they just put it in the bank. So the bonds aren't. And so the mystic says bonds are being bought by regular people. There's nobody buying bonds. Nobody wants a bond. Okay, the only point is that the banks collateralize them. They just put them in the bank and pretend they're an asset. Okay, they're calling it, I own something of value, a real good claim on value. Okay, so I can afford to let some money out on that claim. Whatever that claim is worth, that's a pile of stuff in my stuff pile. Now I can give money based on that because I've guaranteed the money I'm releasing because it's as good as the bond is, technically. And so as long as the government bonds are good, this all works. But we know they're no good. Okay, I mean, statistically they can't ever be cashed. So it really you're just saying how many of them can actually be cashed. How many people can actually go to the federal government and say, give me what the bond is worth, the cash value, and the government actually be able to pay the cash? Well, the answer is going to be somewhere around 0 because, see, the other problem that's happening now with this whole deflation, I mean, this whole busting of the bubble. So the stock market goes down. That means all the assets in the bank. So the bank is saying, this is my collateralized stuff pile, and this is what it's worth. It's worth a certain amount. And when the market goes down, its collateral goes way down. And so now it becomes in jeopardy of not having enough value to cover the amount of money it's let out. So it's paid more it's bought high and it's stuck going to sell low when it has to sell the stuff to pay out the cash. And so it can't, it's going to be giving the stuff back for less than it bought it for. And that's a losing proposition. Buying high and selling low doesn't work. That won't get you richer. That'll get you poorer. So the stock market goes down, banks become in trouble. The whole point was to create mechanisms that didn't allow them getting into too much trouble. Like it would have to go way down before they'd really be in trouble. But the point is they've kind of loosened all of those restrictions, so now they're in trouble. So now they have collateral that ain't worth the money they've lent. They've lent this. Okay, they have collateral worth this. That ain't gonna work. So they're in trouble. And the government's also in trouble because now the banks are going to say, I need the money. And they're going to take the money because they have it in those reserve accounts. But as soon as they cash any of that reserve money, as soon as they ask the Federal Reserve to say, give me the cash, because only cash can come out of the Federal Reserve. Remember, the Federal Reserve, the Fed, is a cash vault. So anything that goes out has to be cash. Anything that goes in is supposed to be cash. Anything that goes out is supposed to be cash. Now, they stuck stuff in that were just IOUs, fake cash. So it's in there, but it's not free yet. But if the banks take it, then it's free, and then it's inflation. Because now it's printed money. So as soon as the banks take it to pay their liabilities, their losses, then there's no money to cover their mistake. I think I'm back. Yes. All right. So what was that? So yeah. So that's real money. So that's real. They got to print the cash. Obviously, you start printing cash. The more cash you make in the world, it's like any other commodity. The more supply you create, the more likely the price is to go down, the value to go down, and that's what will eventually happen when the government has to print cash to pay off all these debts it has. There's a huge amounts of debt. So this is all debt money in the Federal Reserve. It's printed but uncirculated cash. It hasn't been properly accounted for. The government didn't properly collect cash from taxpayers to put into that account. There's no taxpayer money in there from current taxpayers. That's a promise from future taxpayers. and so that's debt. And they don't have the cash. That's printed cash. It's not legitimate cash. It's not part of the $2 trillion in circulation. So the government didn't take in real money to be able to fund that account. It was funded with fake money. And then they have this whole FDIC insurance liability. So all the assets they've insured, you got $7 trillion worth of those. The fund can last 1.4% in the fund, not nearly enough. So the banks have 2.5%, liquidity. The FDIC insurance fund has 1.4%. You can just see, and the stock market goes down 20%. Or what if it goes down 50%? When are the triggers going to be hit where all of a sudden these unsecured accounts, these accounts that only have these insurance policies that only have 1.4% of the assets needed to pay the liability, when will that weakness in those funds show its face, in the sense that how long is it going to take for that 2% not to be able to fix this 50% problem? And it's not going to be able to fix it. So it's going to be, what are you going to do? So a person says, I want cash, and you're not going to be able to produce it because you don't have any way to get it. So the other thing that happens when the stock market goes down, we've created an income tax system that guarantees that all the people who lost money now don't have to pay any taxes. So now revenues to the federal government are going to be skyrocketing down. So the longer the stock market stays down, the less revenue the government's going to be able to take in, because all the rich people will claim losses and say, I don't have to pay any taxes because I lost money. So they're gambling in the market. They call it, risk taking. It's really no risk, because any down period they can just write it off. So Trump, for example, hasn't paid federal income taxes for 20 years because he lost enough money to make him immune from taxes, because he hasn't made enough money. He hasn't made back what he lost. And so he doesn't have to pay any income taxes until he does. And the same is going to be true for this downturn in the market. So if the market doesn't go back up, revenues to the federal government are going to crash. Okay, so instead of getting whatever $2.7 trillion from the taxpayers, they're going to get like 1.2% to they're going to get some. I mean, they're going to get 1.2 trillion or some even lower number because of the fact that everybody's just going to say my losses are more than my taxable. I have no income. I have a negative income. Therefore, I'm protected from taxes until that negative income rises to a neutral income, to nothing. And so I don't pay any taxes except for the profits over time. So if I have any losses, I get to write them off. So all I pay is what I make above the neutral. So I'm only taxed on true profit over time. I'm never taxed on my, again, it's like a free Las Vegas. If you were paying a fee for existing, and that fee went down every time you lost at Las Vegas, and the fee went up when you won at Las Vegas, you'd understand that you're sort of guaranteed I can play at Las Vegas all I want because I can just write off my losses, or always get ways to evade paying any extra taxes. So those two always compensate for each other, and all I really pay for is anything above that. So any income above my losses, where the regular Joe doesn't have that option. He doesn't get to say, my refrigerator broke. I lost money on that deal. I bought a refrigerator one day after the warranty it broke. Terrible loss. He doesn't get to write it off. So anyway, I think that's probably enough of the story. So he's arguing that the money doesn't go into the stock market. Of course, debt goes into the stock market. It's instantly collateralized. He's making this point that the really rich, the super rich, he says, so know how you get super rich? You buy a crappy government bond that gives you less interest than inflation. So somehow you buy something that's a little better than cash, right? I mean, it doesn't fall as fast as cash. But government bonds nowadays, with their terrible interest rates, they're still falling. You're not making any money, okay? You're losing value over time. So he says the super rich want those things. They don't want those things. The point is they get to take those things and just shove them in a bank vault, and they get cash back. So they don't care. Give them as many of those. Print as many of them as you want. And I'll just keep shoving in the bank, and I'll get their cash value, and I'll use the cash to buy stocks. I'll buy something that'll go up in value. That's the plan. That's the plan they operate under. Now, no one's going to be operating under that plan because everybody knows these government bonds are also in jeopardy of being shit. But the banks are so invested in the system, this huge $5 trillion worth of IOUs from the government, okay, that they know if the bonds go bad, the cash goes bad. They know the two of them are so tied together now that there might as well just be an equal sign between them, and the whole system dies if the bonds die. So they'll still buy them because they know there's no system without them. But that's it. They don't buy them because they have any value, that they're useful. They buy them because they're inert. You can just shove them in the vault and get cash for them. All right. So let's play some of this crap.
Click. Right, this is very much a turn on the camera, and for me, try and sort myself out, because I feel like I've been exploded and my thoughts are in all sorts of different places. Again, that'll go on for a while, but we can live through it.
So he's implying he's so certain he's got it. He's close to grokking it. He's like 90% grok, and everybody else is a 10% grokker. And now he's implying that, something's shaken his worldview, but he's spouting exactly the same mush.
I've gone to yesterday's comments on yesterday's video, House, to talk about some things, to get a few things put in boxes, I think is what I want to do. And it's mainly for me.
So it's only the House point was that somehow, yes, look, there's going to be a problem. The world's going to, this economic crisis isn't just going to evaporate and go away. They're not going to be able to just pretend that the underlying conditions are okay. The FDIC insurance fund isn't bankrupt, and that the Fed isn't in preposterous bankruptcy, essentially. I mean, it's put a whole bunch of cash vulnerable to being printed. That these aren't all facts. Yeah, they're facts, and they're not going to just go away. The previous 70 years of deficit spending isn't going to just go away. What else to say? But so his house point is that somehow rich people that own mansions and only two people live in them, somehow we're going to go to some Russian thing or some kind of French Revolution thing, and all of a sudden we're going to force more people into the rich people houses or some other kind of nonsense, which doesn't have anything to do with the reality. The reality is there's still going to be rich and poor after this thing crashes, because some people are going to get out of the crash, early, and they're not going to lose their shirt. They're not going to go bankrupt, and they're going to still have a ton of claims, ton of pieces of paper that say, you owe me. And those are all this debt that has been pumped in for all these years. They're still going to have those IOUs, and they're going to want to cash them, to live on them, to use the money. And we, the people, are going to have to pay them. And that's going to be a huge inequity and a huge liability.
But hopefully it'll be helpfully instructive for you as well. Going to leave live comment to Ricardo with reference to Ricardo's linked YouTube video. He highlights, though, that the stimulus is not always a good idea, since it almost always ends up in the hands of those who throw it at the stock market or increasing asset values, aka the wealthy. In other words, stimulus gets thrown to the wealthy, and it gets to...
All consumption goes to the wealthy, okay? So, I mean, they're the ones making money on everything. Everything we eat, they're making money on. Everything we consume in any way, they make money on. And clearly, they make a huge amount of money on debt. So, this is just how could you even make any other kind of argument? But yes, of course, what is the debt money? What has the $40 trillion that the U.S. government owes, what has it done in the market? And what it's done in the market is give people who don't have money to buy things. That means they bid the prices up. If you couldn't buy a house by borrowing money from somebody who has it, okay, or doesn't have it but claims to be rich, if you couldn't borrow the money, what do you think the average price of a house would be? That is, if you actually had to go to work, get income checks, collect them, and then bid on a house with the money you actually had, okay, and you had to sell your horse and sell your wife into prostitution, do some other things to get enough bills to be able to buy a house. What would the price of houses be? Well, yeah, they'd be 1% of what they are now. Because the only reason why they're so high is because they're being purchased with borrowed money. So the rich are financing a bidding war for everything. They really own it. You don't own it. People don't own their houses, right? They say, oh, home ownership is way up. No, home rental is way up. Okay, they're renting from the rich, but they're not owning anything.
The stock market and bids up asset values. From yesterday, I've said that, and I don't think this was liked, but nobody's argued with it, so you're going to have to...
You won't accept an argument, okay? You're forcing people to write in text comments, right? You make a 13-minute video, and they're supposed to write, 13 minutes of text explaining to you how you're wrong? You won't accept any counter-argument. You're so unfair in how you interact with the world. It's just a preposterous expectation. Yes, you can be demonstrated to be wrong. The money ends up in the market. All government debt ends up in the market.
Wear it, unless you can argue against it. The Fed's balance sheet boosting over the last 10 years has not gone into the stock market or bid up asset prices.
So it's just a ludicrous statement. The whole purpose of it was to do exactly that, to rescue the banks and provide liquidity for the market, to save the leverage. That's why in 2008 they invented this stupid, silly idea. And that's it. That's all it's for. And this idea that protecting the bond market isn't the same thing as protecting the gold market and the oil market and the stock market. Any market you pump up, you're going to end up pumping up the capital that's capable of going to any one of the other markets. The more bitter cash you create, okay, the more stuff that can be bought, the more buying pressure there is. The price has to go up.
Okay. Wear it or argue against it.
Coward.
The wealthy. It's a word, it's a concept, but what does anybody mean when they say it? It's a very sloppy word. I'm talking about.
Okay, so again, this is something we all know. There's a huge difference between no income and $10 trillion worth of, 40 billion or some other kind of silly number that somebody makes. They make $1 billion a year or something. Some of the richest man in the world probably makes that in a year. Because they have a good year. We know that's rich. There's no real problem here. And the whole definition is what percentage of the people own the stock market? 0.1%. Okay, not 99%, not 70%, not 80% of the people. No, a tiny, tiny percentage of the people. Those you can call the rich. And how many of them earned it? That is, they went to a job and earned the money as an income. Or how many inherited it and just own a stock portfolio, a bunch of IOUs saying they own somebody else's labor. Even though they never did a bit of work in their existence, they own a bunch of other people's labor for life.
Sloppy. The videos and podcasts that I listen to have very few assets and very big income.
Okay, so now he's just making a comparison. Well, is the guy who has a big income rich? Well, obviously not, right? That wouldn't be wealthy. Okay, wealth is about acquiring a bunch of assets, a bunch of surplus. So you're not really rich if you've pissed it all away. And the real investment game is you're making your money without doing any work. So a doctor who's getting paid $500,000 a year, he's rich, blah, but he's not rich in an evil way. He's rich in kind of a decent way in the sense that he has a real service he's providing that's so exceptional that people are willing to pay real money for it. He's sort of earned his money, all right, where the other guy just makes interest. Just sits there, puts the money in a stock portfolio and goes, look, it's gone up for 10% a year for 70 years. Gee, do I have to think really hard about doing this manipulating thing? Again, if Donald Trump had actually done that, if Donald Trump had actually just put the money in the bank, or in the stock market, and invested as in a very conservative way, he would be worth 10 times what he is now. His manipulations didn't make him money; they lost him money. I mean, that's how easy the system is to play when you have big money. It's really easy to succeed, not really hard.
Which one's the wealthy one? Just note that the wealthy can appear in different guises. Big assets, small income. Small assets, big income.
Yeah, so he can't even get the difference between somebody who earned money, made money earning it, and people making capital gains where they didn't earn it in any way whatsoever. It's just some sort of profit they got, like owning a house, and it got more valuable. I just sat in it, and it got more valuable. Huge difference. One of them you can understand to be, that's got to be an ill-gotten gain somehow, right? I mean, that's got to be like somehow anti-capitalist, that I don't do anything and I make money. I get rewarded for doing nothing of value at all. Oh yeah, that's got to be somehow not earning it. That can't be a merit system. That can't be something good, like you want the Olympics based on that kind of idea, like the guy who just sits there and he gets to say, I win the medal, I just sat here very well and, I won. No, that can't be a very good system. This is just all horse shit.
But at the end of the year, his balance sheet is as zero as yours because he spent all his money.
Right, but if he spent it on assets, then he's not unpoor. So he's saying somehow a doctor's going to just buy food with his money and he's hookers and stuff like that, and so he bought no durable goods, he bought nothing of value, just experiences that evaporate. Fine. Again, the point is why would I have any trouble saying he's rich? I mean, he's living very richly. Okay, we could argue that way, but he's pissing it all away, so that's really stupid. So yes, he's rich and he's stupid.
On his reasonably big house, reasonably big family people. The workers. You might be a heart surgeon or a bank manager, but you're a salaried person. You probably spend most of your salary. You're a salaried person. Your pension is in the stock market.
Right, and it wasn't always in the stock market. This is where the whole organized crime got connected with unions, because unions started creating their own pension funds, and then whoever was head of the union got to control where the money went, and there was all kinds of kickbacks and money to be made based on where they're going to invest their money. Then the government decided to get in on it, and so they started putting these government pensions in the stock market, because everybody said, look, for 50 years it's been fun, it's all up. Okay, yeah, it's a jagged line, but the jagged line's going up, and it's going way up, okay, like way over inflation. So it's a big win to have your capital in the stock market. But obviously this is an idea that certainly will someday fail. So again, you can't ride on this thing, this this wind up toy bullshit. And I don't know how do you even. There's probably good metaphors for it, but I mean, you used it all up, and then what do you do?
Right, 8 minutes. Right, two things I think to get out here. Yes, I suspect our stock market purchases is the next step in the arsenal. I think Japan already does this. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and Japan is an example of what? Of complete failure. I mean, people are living in inflation. Their lives aren't getting better in Japan. They're just stuck in a mediocrity. He's even described it as this stale, dead life for 25 years. So it's obviously not a successful plan. It's a dead engine. It's doomed to failure. And all of these other countries are doing the same thing now, of just creating all this preposterously excessive debt that can never be paid back. And it's all just inflated how rich the rich get. So you're just making the rich richer by creating more debt.
But if people are looking at me for stock market tips, my tip is, and hopefully you've seen it over the last little while, get the fuck out of it.
Right. Well, he'd say over time, though, don't worry about it. Because he'll say that it doesn't matter whether it takes 10 years or whatever it takes, it's going back up. So that's the argument. I guess I would make the argument that it can't do that and pay back the debt. So the down is going to have something where all the cash is inflated. So you can pay we make $1 worth 1/1,000,000th of a dollar. That way you can pay all the debts back, because you're paying with money that doesn't mean anything. I mean, I owe $500,000. Well, if I make $10 worth $500,000, it's really going to be easy, isn't it? If I devalue the cash, then obviously the debts become irrelevant, because my new salary is going to be, $10 million a year. So the debt's not going to be a problem anymore based on the new cash values. So that's the only way to get rid of all this debt, or else to, in some other jubilee way, pretend that it doesn't exist. But frankly, it's all held by rich people. So from my perspective, yes, you could abolish it tomorrow, and all you've done is inconvenience a tiny percentage of the population. A tiny percentage who are claiming they own all that crap. They own all that future labor. They own all those slaves. They own all that property. Well, let's just say, forget it. You didn't own it, okay? We're done playing this game. You're not worth $40 trillion. You're not $40 billion man. You're not any of that crap. You're just another human like every fucking body else. And it'd be okay if you wanted to live a little better than the rest of us, but you don't want it. You're not satisfied to be a little better. You're not satisfied to have $2 million in the bank. You want to have $2 trillion in the bank. Well, fuck you. That's what the conversation should be. Just fuck all this bullshit. Let's get back to a real merit system where people are paid an income and you have to have real money to buy things. You can't just borrow it.
Let's do the FTSE, the UK. Let's say the central bank and the government see that it's coming down and down. let's do numbers off the top of my head. Let's say it's gone under 4 and it's heading down to 3,500. The government and central bank get together and says in Japanese way, in English, can we possibly think about buying ETFs, or can we buy this stock market? And the central bank will probably say at 3,500, we can do it if you order us to.
All right, well, whatever. So this is silly. The government doesn't overtly buy the stock market. All it does is take paintings off the market, and the market will take care of itself. The price of the Van Goghs goes up if I just take a couple of Van Goghs and hide them somewhere and don't allow them to ever get back on the market. So all I have to do is keep the market, keep the supply small, and the demand will take care of itself. So that's all I have to do. Demand will make the prices go up. So that's the easy way they can fix it. They don't have to directly buy the stock market. All they have to do is create more debt money to go into the stock market. Give the buyers more cash, or give the buyers less to buy. That's all you have to do. And if the cash could be made out of bond money, just put the bond in the vault and take the real money out.
Because politicians are ultimately the most powerful people. We'll do it if we're told to, but we doubt we can defend 3,500. And if we can't defend it when we're trying to defend it...
Right.
Anything
There's no, where the bottom is, where the real value is of the stock market versus the debt value. So all the debt money. So let's just assume all the debt money, the $40 trillion of the government debt. What would be the real value of the stock market absent that $40 trillion worth of capital is the real question. And I don't know how low that number could go.
So we will not be able to defend it. So we wouldn't like to put our faith and credit to trying to defend it when we won't be able to. So let's defend something we can defend, and that'll be a huge drop. Equivalent to around the equivalent of the last drop, S&P down to...
So again, the government isn't buying the stock market at a certain level. It's just buying interest in the stock market. It's making the stocks more valuable by making fewer things that you can buy with money. So by making there fewer things, if there's only 3 things you can buy with money, these 3 things, and money wants to buy things, and I take one of the things away, then the 2 things left will have more bidders. Duh! And the price will go up. That's all they have to do. They don't have to buy the market and actually own stock. They could just let people do that.
666. Big drop.
The bankers, the rich people.
So you're on your own all the way up there. Now, a quick, not why are you on your own, but a quick thingy in A and B. A is, as I've just said, the salaried people go into the stock market. The wealthy people.
So this is just a joke, right? The salary people go into the market. No, they don't. So he has no statistics to defend that. I would argue, if they was real statistics, that 90% of the stock market is owned by people who inherited the stock. That the person who owns it did not earn any money, did not do any great capitalist thing, didn't do a damn thing to earn the stock. So 90% of it's inherited. A little bit of it's owned by the Gateses of the worlds and the other shitheads who claim they earned it, but claim they earned it by some shenanigans, by just ripping everybody off, essentially. Stealing from all of us a little tiny bit. Because they owned a big giant monopoly engine thingy, a cash engine of some kind. And the rest is pension money. Those are the real facts, not this horse shit. The regular people own the stock market. The working people own the stock market. What a pile of crap. I mean, they can show you statistically that one person like Bill Gates owns more asset value, more stuff, than the bottom 100 million people in the country. So the bottom 100 million people, if you add up all the stuff they actually own, their profit to deficit, they're still poorer than Bill Gates. And he's making some argument that they own the stock market and Bill Gates doesn't. Bill Gates owns bonds. We know what he owns. He owns stock. We know all the richest people, the top 10,000, the top 1 million people. They don't own bonds. They own stocks. I mean, how is he even making this argument? It's such a stupid argument.
people, and I mean wealthy people, go into the bond market. The bond market is now currently being...
It's just complete bullshit. The bond market is no market. It's not even a market. It's like, again, it's only for the banks especially. They need to, again, they have to meet that 2.5% cash flow liquidity thing. So they buy bonds just to control their liquidity, because it's as good as cash. The government considers their own bonds as good as cash when you own one. They consider it as good as cash because it's their debt, obviously. So they can move that around to improve their liquidity, to make the bank meet that 2.5 regulatory requirement. But that's the only thing bonds are used for. And then in people who want to exchange currencies, people want to be able to buy and sell currencies quickly, to make little bits of money off the differences in the value of the currencies. They'll use bonds to do that. But they have very little value otherwise.
And completely manipulated by the central banks. Let's say the bond market is under a great deal of control. The stock market isn't, and it's not likely to be for a long time. Okay, now the overall...
So just more nonsense. Obviously the stock market is controlled by the number of assets in the commodity market. The entire commodity market is controlled by the amount of IOUs in possession to bid. The bidding cash is deciding the value. The more bidding IOUs you give people, the more I can use. I have a debt from a guy 500 years from now, right? I own him. I own this slave 500 years from now. And so there's an IOU, and it says it's worth $50,000 because that's what a slave 500 years from now is worth. And I'm using it as a bidding chip. I'm using it to bid up the price.
Okay, for this, again, it's wildly wrong in its look, but it's right in a way. As I said, cash money, the filthy stuff...
There's nothing right about what he said. So again, the regular workers don't invest income in the stock market. Tiny percentage of the value of the stock market is held by people who bought stock with their income. Tiny percentage. I mean, 0.00001% maybe. Tiny percentage.
That you get in your wallet is old historical king's money, and the bank money is kind of the modern, we can do our thing, people's money.
They're all just debt, okay? And one of them, there's a controlled amount of it, no more than, right? So it's a commodity. And the rest of it, keep making more of it. Yeah, I mean, one's a credit card, one's cash. That's the real distinction. There's no other distinction. That's all it is. There's cash, and then there's credit card. Which one, is real? I mean, obviously the credit card is a claim on cash. It's obviously this is the real thing, and this credit card is the dangerous, stupid thing where you won't win.
The bond market is the old king's money. That's what they dealt with. Their bits of paper were bonds. The stock market...
So again, the bonds are not the king's money. The king's money is cash. Cash has to be, like any other commodity, you can't just print it. If you just print it, it has no value. It's clearly got to be a controlled commodity. It's got to keep its prices equal to 100 sheep or 5 dogs or whatever, the rest of the value in the economy. It has to be regulated to stay consistent with the value of the rest of the things in the economy.
Coming up with the limited liabilities companies through Holland and onto Great Britain is the people's money, where the people invested. Do you get the idea? The king's money is the cash and the bonds. The people's money...
All right, so the cash and the bonds are the king's... No, the cash, the bonds are not the king's money. The bonds are just like any other IOU. They're worse than any other IOU. Because we already know the government can't get the cash, especially in bad times. When the stock market goes down, income goes down to the government, okay? It doesn't make as much money. So it clearly can't pay off old debts when its income is declining.
Are the bank digits and the stock market. And there will be, because history always leaves a hangover, there will be a hangover of preference for control from the ultimate source, which is the government authority of which to protect first and last.
Yes, who gets out with some real claims on cash and who gets totally screwed by saying, fuck you, we don't have the money. The FDIC insurance can't cover the assets it's guaranteed. It's a fact. How does it fix that problem? If it prints the cash, well, then you obviously weren't FDIC insured, because now what you're going to get back, the cash you're going to get back, isn't going to be worth the cash you paid. The cash you paid bought 10 sheep. The cash you originally invested bought 10 sheep. $1 bought 10 sheep. Now $1 is going to buy 1 sheep. So clearly the money you're going to get back is going to be so much less valuable.
So this video is to say, don't look for protection from the ultimate authority for the stock market, because it's a people's thing.
Yeah, so it's just a silly thing. It's clearly that's the only reason the government's funneling all these trillions of dollars in, is first to try to maintain some consumption, to keep businesses alive. And the rest of it is just to keep this, to try to get the stock market reinflated, to create bidding chips, more money to bid on the value of the stocks.
And the bond market will be protected now, not just first, it's protected now.
It's completely, there's no such thing as protecting the bond market. Okay, there really isn't. It's just not a nonsense. I mean, obviously, when you buy your own bonds and hide them, you're going to make the bonds that exist more valuable, because whatever their value was. But again, they have no value. All they represent is a way of banks turning the government's debt into bidding chips for stocks. Bonds are just a vehicle to create buying cash, meaning, bank cash.
But the stock market, until they're desperately pushed, they will not defend it. And all that stuff about who's wealthy and who's not.
Yeah, so again, all of these assets have to go, so all the money has to go somewhere. But the point is that all the money declines with that little stupid line going down. So once the stock value goes down, then the collateral value goes down. And getting it back up again is really difficult, because you have to put even more stuff in to get it to go back up, and then it'll reinflate another notch. But yes, I mean, when there's this idea that there's some point where you're too leveraged, you've got too much crap, and the crap starts to unravel, and the bankruptcies start to unravel. So if they let anybody go bankrupt, then it's going to be a spiral of bankruptcies, because nobody's going to be able to provide the cash, especially the federal government. It can't pay any of its debts.
Income, if you're living off income, you're in the stock market, and you're probably not wealthy.
So that's just silly, right? The non-wealthy are in the stock market. They own 99% of the stock market is owned by people making maybe $100,000 a year. No, sorry, not even close. They own a tiny sliver of the stocks. The vast majority of them are owned by the top 1 or 2%. Okay. So he's just so full of shit. He's such a, he's just so full of shit. I mean, it's the defending of the silly wealthy, this tiny percentage of the human race that we have to glorify and protect from the inconvenience that they won't be able to have caviar every day. Gee, what a horrible crime. Oh, this is pathetic. They won't be able to piss away money on just absolute waste and full bullshit. We won't be able to have more and more silly little yachts that nobody even sails anywhere. They're just for looking at. You walk on them in the harbor and just, oh, look, what a yacht. Never goes anywhere, never does anything. It just sits there as a representation of, look, I am silly wealthy. I have so much money I just can't even throw it away fast enough. There's a resistance to how fast I can throw it away. And they're throwing away real human labor. They're throwing away life and death. And this asshole glorifies them as some sort of essential functioning cog in the human condition. We somehow need this nonsense.